So President and Mrs. Carter will be joining us for lunch, but for this particular session, since we know they want to hear from all of you, we will provide them the video because, as you know, we are live webcasting this. And so for going forward, please make sure you're in your seats 10 minutes before our start time. So moving to our next panel and furthering our discussion, Restoring the Social Contract. I'd like to now turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Balakrishna, again, please.
Thank you very much. Welcome back after break. In this session, we're going to sort of develop and further think about what restoring the social contract. We talked a lot about faith, institutions, and people. So what is the social contract? So we are lucky to have two distinguished speakers, and I will introduce them one at a time. To my left is Dr. Graça Fonseca. She's the Secretary of State for Administrative and Modernization for the Portuguese government. If you all remember that there was an excellent article in the New York Times yesterday about what the Portuguese government has been able to accomplish. So we're hoping that we're going to hear from Graça about what that was about. She was born in Lisbon. She has a degree in law from the University of Lisbon and a PhD in sociology from Lisbon's ISCTE. And prior to the position of Secretary of State of Administrative Modernization, she was the Deputy Mayor of Lisbon. So I'm handing it over to Graça.
Thank you very much. Okay.
There we go.
No, it is. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It has been a terrific days with everybody gathered here at the Carter Center, and thank you very much, President, for the invitation. In fact, like Radhika said, there was this New York Times article that was entitled, and I'm quoting, Portugal dared to cast aside austerity, and it's having a major revival. This is the title of the New York Times article, then describes what this government has made to cast aside austerity and implement a different economic and social program with different public policies. In fact, Portugal, it is, we think, a good example on how a blind, excessive austerity cannot work when it's implemented in countries. In fact, for the time, it was 4 years that the program of the Troika was implemented in Portugal, the facts show first that the budgetary deficit problem, which was the main goal to be resolved, remained unsolved. The economic recession deepened. It was not a good time for economic in Portugal, and two more facts are very, very worrying in our case. First, the social cohesion really got threatened. The risk of poverty augmented a lot. Unemployment rose to levels that never before we have registered in Portugal, and the social and economic rights were had a huge backlash during those years. And there is a fourth fact that also is very important, and usually we don't speak about it. It's about the quality of democracy. Every democratic indexes that you can see in the world show that there is a strong relations between economic and social cohesion and the quality of democracy. The deficit of democracy nowadays is much more worrying than the deficit of our budgets. At least coming from the West, this is nowadays our position. So what this government did since 2015, late 15 in December, was we turned the page of austerity back, and mainly we worked on giving back confidence to citizens and to companies. because we need citizens to have confidence in the future, in the ability to put their kids in school and to consume and to buy products. And we need companies to have confidence to invest and to generate jobs. We need confidence from those citizens and companies. So we did it, restoring the social protection levels to before the intervention of the austerity program. And we also implemented a very strong program on economy, giving incentives to companies to invest and to attract new investment to Portugal. In fact, just to give you a number, I'm not going to numbers because they are published, and I would like to speak about other important programs. In fact, in 2 years, we were able to, the economy was able to create 300,000 more jobs just after the austerity program. So economy started making its movement again, and the levels of social protection rise again, and the risk of poverty really dropped 4% in that period. And very important, the level of individual income, that percentage of money that citizens have to live, that has dropped 4% during austerity program, again raised 4% after the going back to public policies before the austerity program. But not only is about social and economic rights, it's about civil rights. It's about quality of democracy. It's about not having democracy given for granted. President Carter spoke about that, and sometimes we forget that democracy really is not a taken thing. So we developed some public policies programs to empower people to build their own democracy with us and to build it in a way that is sustainable. So we call it, if you want, a participatory sustainable development. Two mechanisms are very important for us at this point to this goal. First, we implemented the first, and at this point, the only one, participatory budget at the national level in the world. So what we have decided is it is important to engage people in the decision on how public money that we all pay through our taxes is spent. So each year there is an amount of money in the national budget of Portugal, this year is about 5 million euros, that is allocated only to projects, investments that are proposed by people and voted by people. We, the politicians, have no say about that money in our national budget. Last year, for you to have an idea, last year the most voted idea presented from citizens and voted by the citizens was to give free access to everybody that completes 18 years old this year, free access to culture. So just for you to have an image, what this means is that two Portuguese citizens proposed that for a year, everybody that completed 18 years old would have access to culture. This idea was voted by 7,000 citizens. So this means that the life of more than 100,000 young kids this year has something in their life that hadn't before, because some people voted so that that money would be allocated for them to have access to culture. So this is a mechanism that is intended to let people know that it's not indifferent whether you participate or not. It's not indifferent if you stay at home or you don't stay at home. It's not indifferent what you do with your citizenship. Of course, politicians and governments have their role. I have my role, of course, but we all have a specific role in society. The second mechanism that we are developing is on SDG agenda. We call it GovTech for SDGs. We need to develop trusts. We need to develop a new connection with young people in our countries. We need to connect with young entrepreneurs that are thinking about what am I going to do to work, to develop. I want to have something with my work that has an impact on my community and in my country. So we challenge young entrepreneurs to develop products and services that are aligned with the SDG agenda. And we are supporting through financial support and international capacitation supports young entrepreneurs that have products that go from sneakers made out of plastic from the oceans till using blockchain to develop a new service connecting healthcare assistance in the country. So it's a very wide, if you want, wide spectrum of products and services that is now engaging all parts of Portugal in this SDG agenda. And this is also a very important point, and here I finish, is that we have to engage people, we have to empower people, we have to take care of social and economic rights. We have to be aware that social and economic cohesion is so vital for democracy, for peace, for stability in our countries. And we have to manage to put citizens, ONGs, civil society, governments, and very important, international institutions, especially the financial international institutions, to see that it's very important to work out the budget deficit in our countries. But if we do it at the expenses of social and economic cohesion, we are not doing a good job. And this is very important for us to realize. Thank you very much.
That was excellent. And we just heard from the kind of governments we all want. Thank you. The next speaker is Soledad Garcia Munoz. She's a special rapporteur on economic, social, and cultural and environmental rights for the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights in Argentina. She's a lawyer with a diploma in advanced studies in human rights from the University Carlos III of Madrid, with a research proficiency in the doctorate program as well. She's also been a professor of public international, oh, I didn't write it all down. Public international law. It tells you you shouldn't do this early in the morning without coffee. And at the National University of La Plata. And we'll talk about the human rights mechanisms and the use of it. And she will be speaking in Spanish. And so if those of you who don't speak Spanish might need to put on headphones. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. I will speak in Spanish, the second most spoken language in this country, the language of the people that risk its life every day to live in USA.
Go ahead, Radhika.
If you need
I can wait. Okay. Dear all, amigas y amigos, me siento enormemente honrada por esta invitación y la oportunidad de compartir algunas ideas en esta sesión, tan especial por la presencia del presidente Carter y la señora Rosalind Carter. Ante todo, déjenme expresarles mi admiración por toda la obra que este matrimonio ha hecho, por su maravilloso centro y su fantástico equipo, también por su impresionante historia de amor. Sé que hace poco cumplieron 72 años de matrimonio, lo cual es un verdadero récord, y yo quiero darles muchas felicidades. Hemos hablado estos días de la importancia de la colaboración, de la contención y el cuidado para quienes defendemos derechos humanos. Ustedes, el matrimonio Carter, como mi marido Luis, que vino conmigo hasta Atlanta, son gran ejemplo para mí de la importancia de la familia y de los afectos en nuestras vidas. Gracias, amor. Hace poco visité Nicaragua con la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos y comprobé in situ lo duras que pueden ponerse las cosas para quienes defienden los derechos humanos y la democracia. Al final de esa visita, habíamos documentado 76 personas muertas, 868 heridos y 468 detenidas, en su mayoría estudiantes, población civil, defensores de derechos humanos y periodistas. A 19 de julio y desde el comienzo de las protestas, el 18 de abril, ya contabilizamos 277 personas asesinadas y más de 2.000 heridas. Por eso yo quiero pedir que hagamos un momento de silencio en tributo a todas esas personas que están luchando por la democracia y los derechos humanos en Nicaragua y en todo el mundo. Gracias. El caso de Nicaragua, como el de Venezuela, que también es de máxima preocupación, o el de USA, ejemplifican tristemente cómo la interdependencia de los derechos humanos se corresponde con la de sus violaciones. En el fondo y consecuencias de la crisis de Nicaragua, por ejemplo, están los derechos sociales, el incendio de la Reserva Natural de Indio Maíz, el intento de modificar la Ley de Seguridad Social con detrimento de los derechos de las personas adultas mayores o de los trabajadores, de los mismos empleadores. El caso de Nicaragua ejemplifica también la importancia mayúscula del trabajo de la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos y sus relatorías especiales. La Comisión es el órgano principal de la Organización de los Estados Americanos, creado en 1959 con el mandato de promover y proteger los derechos humanos en los 35 estados del continente. Cada día compruebo la esperanza y la fe de miles de personas que genera el trabajo de la Comisión como mi propio mandato en las personas y comunidades de toda la región. Este año celebramos el 70 aniversario de la Declaración Americana de Derechos Humanos, que fue pionera, pues se adoptó meses antes que la Declaración Universal y fue pionera en la indivisibilidad como el reconocimiento del derecho humano a la felicidad. Algo que también reconoció la Declaración de Independencia de Estados Unidos de América. También celebramos el 40 aniversario de la Corte Interamericana y el 30 del Protocolo de San Salvador sobre derechos económicos, sociales y culturales. Es un protocolo anexo al Pacto de San José de Costa Rica, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos que el presidente Jimmy Carter firmó el 6 de enero de 1977. Y me parece mentira poder reconocer esto en este centro, en este día tan especial. Gracias, presidente Jimmy Carter, por firmar el Pacto de San José de Costa Rica. Eso nos da la esperanza de que algún día, ojalá muy pronto, Estados Unidos también va a ratificar ese tratado internacional. Junto con el aporte crucial de la Comisión en época de las dictaduras genocidas de los años 70, 80, del propio caso de Guantánamo, aquí en Estados Unidos, debemos reconocer que cada vez es más necesario nuestro trabajo en esta región. En el sistema de casos, de monitoreo, de promoción de políticas públicas, recibimos cada año como unas 2.000 peticiones de personas y grupos que desde todas las partes de América llegan a la Comisión reivindicando sus derechos. y protegemos a través de nuestras medidas cautelares a cientos de personas y comunidades, como los usuarios del río Mesapa, en Honduras, o las comunidades de La Oroya y Cuninico, en Perú, afectadas por la contaminación de su agua, cientos de personas ahora en Nicaragua, estudiantes, sacerdotes, médicos y voluntarios. La Comisión tiene casos emblemáticos como el María da Penha contra Brasil, que da nombre a la ley de Brasil contra la violencia de género. El caso Sarayaku, que después Patricia nos va a ilustrar. El caso Lagos del Campo, trabajadores cesados contra Perú, en los que por primera vez la Corte vanguardistamente ha justiciabilizado directamente los derechos sociales, el derecho al trabajo, el caso Poblete contra Chile sobre derecho a la salud. Es en ese contexto que se crea el mandato que la Comisión me confió, que tengo el honor de llevar adelante desde hace 6 meses y que tiene todo el sentido que se haya creado, porque vivimos en el continente más desigual del planeta, donde 186 millones de personas viven en la pobreza, 61 millones de personas viven en la extrema pobreza y en el que más líderes ambientales mueren cada año por llevar adelante la defensa del medio ambiente. El mandato nace por un clamor de la sociedad civil. Es un mandato con base social. Ignacio, como parte de la sociedad civil y de esa fantástica organización de derechos sociales, no me va a dejar mentir. Es la segunda relatoría especial que se ha creado en toda la historia del sistema y es un paso histórico hacia la indivisibilidad de los derechos humanos. Eso queremos ser desde este mandato, un faro para el sistema y para la región toda sobre indivisibilidad de los derechos humanos con nuestra agenda estratégica, que está completamente alineada con la Agenda 2030, que está basada en indivisibilidad, progresividad, taxation y redistribución, género, diversidad, interseccionalidad, desarrollo, interdisciplinariedad, radica, educación en derechos humanos y anticorrupción como uno de los temas que más afectan los derechos sociales y los derechos en su conjunto. Es una agenda de vanguardia y de innovación para la protección de derechos humanos, incluidos los ambientales. Es algo que me gustaría añadir al maravilloso texto que nos han presentado. Y es un avance histórico porque supone, como dijimos, romper la lógica de la Guerra Fría, pasar de la retórica a la acción en la indivisibilidad, la interdependencia y en que todos los derechos están relacionados entre sí, como dijo Viena de 1993. Tenemos muchos logros a 10 meses de instalar la relatoría. El caso Nicaragua es un ejemplo. Gracias al trabajo de la relatoría, el patrón de represión del derecho a la salud quedó evidenciado, pero también tenemos muchos desafíos que estamos tratando de superar. Estamos elaborando el que va a ser el primer informe sobre estándares interamericanos sobre business and human rights. Estamos apostando a proyectos estratégicos sobre agua, saneamiento y alimentación, cambio climático, salud, derechos sexuales y reproductivos y un derecho que es mi sueño como relatora, el derecho al cuidado de quienes más lo necesitan y también de quienes cuidan. Sé que este es un derecho que a la señora Rosalind Carter le gusta especialmente. Por ello, son grandes desafíos por tratarse de una agenda pionera que confronta grandes intereses y resistencias y es un mandato tan grande y urgente como pobre en cuanto a recursos. Por eso en mi último minuto voy a hacer, como siempre hago en estos tiempos fundacionales, un llamado a recibir todo el apoyo que ustedes desde sus respectivos países, instituciones puedan hacer para que este mandato siga creciendo, se siga consolidando. Y quiero dejar constancia que no es un mandato mío, no es un mandato ni siquiera de la Comisión. Es un mandato de millones y millones de campesinos, trabajadores, pueblos indígenas, mujeres y 186 millones de personas que viven en la pobreza. Desde Argentina hasta Canadá, hasta Alaska y por supuesto es un mandato de la Pachamama. Dejo constancia que nuestro entusiasmo es mayor que nuestras limitaciones. Como Eduardo Galeano, el poeta uruguayo, dijo, la utopía sirve para caminar y yo creo que la adversidad también nos sirve para caminar. Como creo, y aquí termino, que el mejor y mayor contrato social de la historia de la humanidad son los derechos humanos y el ideal de libertad y de igualdad que plantea mi manta preferido. Es el mantra del artículo 1 de la Declaración Universal, cuando dice que todos los seres humanos nacemos libres e iguales en dignidad y en derechos, en dignity and rights, en dignité et droit. Y dotados como estamos de razón y conciencia, estamos llamados a comportarnos fraternalmente y voy a añadir sororalmente, los unos con los otros, las unas con las otras. Seamos unidos en faith, en freedom y en faith in equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think I have to turn that off. Thank you so much for those inspiring words. What I'd like to do is to open it up for comments from all of you, and I would like you to keep your comments to 2 minutes, and I will say this if you run out of time. And so I'm going to, should I do that? And I'm going to start actually with Cassandra.
Good morning. Again, to echo the sentiments of all the other participants, it is such an honor and a privilege to be in this place and to share. And I was asked to share just a short summary of some of what I said on yesterday. And I will begin with this. A social contract is an agreement, and it's language, it's a mutual agreement. It's language that is borrowed from the Enlightenment age, from John Locke and June Rousseau. And if that was the period of enlightenment, this is a period of social and economic and political darkness. In order for a social contract to actually be enforced, it is only legitimate if both parties actually uphold the agreement. In America right now, the social contract is illegitimate. It's an illegitimate document that is based on the fraudulent concept of human hierarchy, whose ontology is steeped in racism. The slave purveyors who founded this country deemed that those of African descent, like myself and my ancestors, were less than human. And so what we've been trying to do is to legitimize something that was already illegitimate. We watched the clip of Dr. King preparing for the March on Washington, and he indicated that they were going to get the check that had been flagged insufficient. A bank flags a check insufficient if an account is overdrawn. In the case of America, it is a moral insufficiency that we are dealing with. The account has been overdrawn from the blood of my ancestors on plantations all across this country to the blood of Michael Brown, who lied in the streets for 4.5 hours in Ferguson, and continues to be overdrawn as policies are legislated based on white supremacy and racist politics. Dr. King reminded us in the letter from the Birmingham jail that an immoral law is no law at all. And so instead of reparations, what we have is legal retaliation. And so but I'm glad that America does not get the final word. We are in this room today because there are people working all over America, all over this globe, to ensure that human rights becomes a reality. And so, as Reverend Blackman said this morning, there is hope, but it does not lie in those who will make illegitimate laws. The prophet Isaiah actually said, woe to those who make illegitimate laws, those who seek to the oppressed, and those who deny widows and orphans justice. Hope lies in the work that we are doing in this place, in the work of the church, in the work of Faith in Action and other organizers across this country, and in human rights defenders in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Lulu.
Hola, voy a hablar en español. Gracias por estos días en el que personas defensoras de todo el mundo hemos llegado a la conclusión de que las inequidades que nos atraviesan las compartimos a nivel global. yo quisiera que si pensamos en igualdad, no solo pensemos en la igualdad que sí queremos, claro, que es, por ejemplo, la igualdad entre mujeres y hombres, en la igualdad salarial, por ejemplo, pero yo personalmente, como mujer mexicana, feminista, defensora de derechos humanos, no quiero solo una igualdad que me permita o me haga contribuir al mismo sistema que perpetúa inequidades estructurales. Yo quiero una igualdad que me permita luchar en igualdad de condiciones contra el sistema estructural que nos oprime globalmente y que hemos visto aquí a lo largo de estos días, que oprime a comunidades originarias en África y en América Latina por igual, y seguro en el sur de Asia también. Y hemos visto también que en el sur de los Estados Unidos. Yo quisiera invitarnos a ser más atrevidos, más guerreros y a pensar cómo estamos pensando el modelo de igualdad que queremos, cómo está construido, bajo qué indicadores, cómo entendemos la riqueza, porque hemos estado hablando de riqueza y de pobreza. Pensamos en un modelo de riqueza que se basa en la acumulación, en el crecimiento acumulacionista, en tener más, que ha demostrado ser un sistema de devastación que está poniendo en peligro la vida humana, pero también la vida de todas las entidades vivas del planeta. Creo que ahí es a donde tenemos que explorar para ser más contundentes con esta realidad en la que vivimos, porque la vida de defensoras y defensores de derechos humanos en los front lines, como decimos, está en riesgo porque se están enfrentando justo a esos poderes gigantescos que son como, por ejemplo, las extractivas y las industrias globales, por defender su tierra y su modo de vida ancestral e histórico. Creo que la pregunta a hacernos es desafiante, pero tenemos que hacerla ya y ahora, porque no podemos pensar en igualdad bajo el mismo esquema de desigualdad estructural que muchas veces se basa en corporaciones basadas en países del norte o países como Estados Unidos, y podemos ser realmente revolucionarios pensando en cómo desactivar esas estructuras de raíz. Gracias.
Thank you very much. And next, I'll pick up Sana. If you want to speak, if you could put your name tag up front.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone who has included me here in the proceedings over the past week. They've been really life-changing, I think, for me, coming from a country which apparently claims to have the best social contract in the world, one of the most progressive constitutions. Sorry. I'll also try and speak louder. And I think given the light of the proceedings today, there is a temptation for us to look inwards. As we see across Europe and North America, the temptation to look inwards and to edify national social contracts in response to the rise of right-wing politics or extremist groups is one that is really tempting. However, as the world has globalized, as bodies have moved across different borders time and again over our history, I would argue that instead of looking nationally, there is an opportunity we have to build solidarity in an international social contract across borders. And so actually a poem that Tracy shared with me by Warsan Shire called Home says that no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, breath bloody in their throats. The boy you went to school with who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. And so I argue in this context of the world, what opportunities is there for us to make a renewed commitment to an international social contract that edifies the Declaration for Human Rights, and not only that, that calls to account global leaders of the West, of the South as well, that continue to perpetuate injustices and violation of the treaties, of the frameworks that they've claimed to stand for globally. I think that an international social contract that is built on civil society solidarity is one such opportunity to renew strength in the 70th anniversary, to make it more than just symbolic, to make it more meaningful, and to organize ourselves in ways that actually redistribute that power as we see corporates gaining control and access of funding for the United Nations. That power is just a resource power of economics. How do we use our power of body, our power of mind, our power of solidarity to rethink and reshape that global debate for change? Thank you.
Francis?
Thank you very much. Looking at social contract for me is something that, as we sit here today as human rights defenders, I ask myself this question: can we hold our countries through the United Nations accountable for their actions? Because as I sat here the past 3 days and listened to all the different human rights defenders here, the question that I have asked myself is, why are countries who sign up to the Universal Declaration of Independence, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, beginning to turn their backs? It's only because of power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Unless we develop the opportunity to have a peer review mechanism within the UN section, we tend to go back into the bitter days where nobody gives a hang about the other person. And I think coming out of this program in the next few days, I'm sure that, as usual, you will be sharing this communique. There's a need that the communique speak to the leaders of the world and let them know that they cannot continue to suppress human rights defenders and their people as a whole. The citizens of every country are the ones that gave them the power. But many a times, once they get into that authority, they forget that power is inherent in the people. So going forward, my suggestion is that as we build the collaboration and consolidation that we want to, we need to strengthen our enforcement on leaders, world leaders, from the Western to the South to Africa. For example, I was shocked this morning when I heard that African leaders are now planning to eliminate civil society work. If they want to review where we getting our resources, how we get our resources, then that means they are infringing on our rights. Therefore, those who depend on us to speak on their behalf, they tend to die silently. And that is something for me that we should not tolerate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nika?
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Carter Center. It was 2 years ago where we met actually here, and we start thinking about the importance of macroeconomic policies and how it's impact the global inequality. And I do believe the social contract, as important it is between the member states and the people, but also SDG framework has created an international social contract for all of us, and how we are looking into the macroeconomic policy in global scale, beyond the borders. And the violent extremism these days has defined the notion of power. The power which is based on guilt, shame, and control, these days need to be redefined differently. How the power is allowing us to and enabling us to think of not the shared power, but shared responsibility, the notion of encouragement for greater collaboration, to be able to see and guide a channel of services to the people. So UNDP and Rutgers University and different civil society are thinking of how actually we have to consider the importance of macroeconomic policies at the global scale, at the regional scale, and be able to redefine that. And this is within the SDG framework, the SDG goal 10, which is considered very much orphaned within the other SDG, the SDG 16, and not to forget the SDG 5, which is importance of the gender equality. So thank you so much for creating this forum that has enabled the work for the last 2 years between these different partners to think at the larger scale and the policy level how to take the work forward.
Thank you, Nika. Next, Jim.
I want to begin by thanking the Carter Center for this extraordinary gathering and giving a shout out to one of the many prophetic acts Jimmy Carter did when he was in office, which was installing solar energy on the roof of the White House. President Reagan quickly took it down after he occupied the White House. But it's also worth noting that at this point, solar energy costs 1/300th the cost of what it cost when President Carter put it on the White House. The second thing I want to do is to comment on this part of our session that focuses on restoring the social contract, and do so in the context of President Carter's new book on faith in a variety of directions. You know, I think we all have faith in the continuity of creation. And 7 generations of humans, as a consequence of greed, have jeopardized the continuity of creation. It's not only the case that human rights require continuity of creation in order to be guaranteed, but so does everything else we consider human. So restoring continuity of creation by dealing directly with climate change is one of the great challenges before us, and it has everything to do with the conversations we've been having the past few days. I'll be presenting President Carter's staff with a book, hopefully, that will get into President Carter's hands, published a couple of months ago, Climate Church, Climate World, which discusses the role of faith in regard to addressing climate change, and that's the focus of my work going forward. Climate change amplifies every form of injustice, including the injustice of violating human rights. The final thing I want to do is to pick up on something that Tracy and others of you have focused on, which is courage and perseverance. I have never been in a gathering where I have felt a greater concentration of courage than in the time we have spent together in the past few days. And I am just so grateful to every one of you who have contributed that and who will take that courage back to your countries. In addition to that, the link to perseverance was made. And I'll conclude by commenting that the last time I was at the White House, I was next to Julian Bond, now of blessed memory. As we were hauled away, having been arrested at the gates of the White House, he and I had the opportunity to sit in a hot wagon together next to one another, our hands and feet cuffed. And when I asked him what the most important thing for him was in terms of resistance, he said perseverance. That's the most important thing. So I thank all of you for your perseverance and commend you to go forward with that courage and perseverance you have already manifested. Thank you.
Mary?
Okay. Now it's fine. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Carter Center. This is a great privilege for me to be the first time from Afghanistan to such a big platform as a human rights defender, so to see the family of human rights defenders. It really gives me more strength to go and fight more and more for protecting and promoting women human rights in Afghanistan. One thing which is during the last 2 days that we have discussed, one of the biggest challenge that we see that in a country, it was not only Afghanistan, I realized that there was most countries and particularly women's organizations, that they are the champions of women's rights or human rights, that they are closing day by day, the organization are closing, the challenges or they are facing, there is no consideration and no one has focused at how to support and how to be behind them. The second thing is that now I see like it is not only our responsibility as a human rights defenders to fight for human rights. This is the responsibility of all states. This is the responsibility of all the biggest donors. This is the responsibility of all of us that we must invest on justice. We must invest on human rights, promotion on human rights, because now we see like day by day that country like Afghanistan, the young generation are very hungry and they are joining the insurgents group because there is no justice, they don't have access to justice, they don't have jobs, and due to all those problems that they are joining the insurgents group. We must invest in a state of war. We must invest on promoting human rights. This is the time that we all must work on that. This is not the responsibility of us as a small groups in our countries or a small group at this room. This is the responsibility of all states that we must invest on promoting and protecting human rights and justice. Because if we don't do that, we will continuously, we will see the conflict will be continued, the war will be continued. It is not on those countries, it will be take around the world. My humble request from all of us that we must to be united to make accountable our governments, to make accountable the states, to make accountable the biggest donors that they are involved on promoting and protecting human rights around the world. Thank you so much.
Ignacio.
Thank you, Radhika and panel. I want to pick up on a point that Masana made about the international dimensions of a social contract and how human rights can be a basis for that. I think if the Universal Declaration for Human Rights is to be the foundation of a new international social contract, I think there's one article of the Universal Declaration that we really need to look at and to make our own. And it very often gets overlooked and barely gets mentioned in these discussions. And it's the very last right that's mentioned in the UDHR, Article 28, that everyone has the right to a social and international order in which the rights set forth in this declaration can be realized. Many of the deprivations, particularly economic, social, and cultural rights deprivations that we've been discussing over the last few days, they result from actions and from practices of wealthy governments and of other global institutions dominated by those powerful governments. We've heard about the role of the IMF in pushing austerity. President Carter talked about the inequities, the income inequities that are being driven by US tax laws. Well, that's being replicated at the global level. You know, internationally, the broken international tax regime is draining resources from low and middle income countries. Some $100 billion annually are being drained through tax abuse, through corporate tax abuse facilitated by rich countries acting as tax havens. That's 4 times more than developing countries receive in overseas development aid. So some of us in the human rights community, particularly those who are based in those wealthy, powerful countries, we're starting to try to use the human rights framework and the notion that human rights apply beyond borders, that states have extraterritorial human rights obligations. We're trying to use that notion, that powerful but still underutilized notion, to hold these states accountable, to hold, for example, using CEDAW to hold Switzerland accountable as a tax haven. In an era when the multilateral framework is eroding, I think we need to look for strategies for invoking human rights beyond borders. And I would ask you to think about that perhaps adding that to the declaration, something that addresses the erosion of the multilateral human rights framework and upholds the notion of human rights responsibilities beyond borders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio. Very important point. Becky?
Thank you, and I echo the sentiments of being highly honored to be participating, and thank the Carter Center for inviting me and Georgia Wan to the table. My comments are just that I am concerned about the lack of discussion about state violence and the role that the militarization of our federal budget, militarization of our not just our economies, but of our culture, especially here in the US, which is the only place I can speak for. In the US, you don't have to be a human rights defender to be killed. You just have to be Black. And I think that, I don't think that people recognize the level of white supremacy and how deeply it is has just as sort of a pure evil. And I know it's not just it's any type of racial superiority that also comes with a class and a heteropatriarchal mindset that people are less than human. And I think as long as we don't examine how white supremacy shows up in our own organizations and in our own frameworks even, I think that we are vastly missing the point. So if we don't have the people who are most directly affected by any lack of human rights, if they're not the people who are at the table at these microphones, then we are not going to get where we need to go. And so as much as possible, how can we make sure that we're passing the torch? Like, we're standing in our power and doing what we can do, and then how are we passing the torch to people who don't feel like they would ever end up at a table like this? And how are we examining how white supremacy and militarism and shows up in our work? Because no one's immune to white supremacy and the abuse of power and the sort of how easily it is to sort of be corrupt as a human being. And so I just want to put that out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Becky. And I would add to white supremacy, settler colonialism as well. So let's not separate those two things. Hafida?
Thank you very much. And I would like also to echo everybody here that have been expressing such a deep gratitude to the Carter Center. And I have been very moved by what I have been listening to, not only the ambassador who talked the first one, but also by the President Carter. Thank you for all. I will be very brief, and I would like to mention one group of population that have not, might be, maybe I'm mistaken, but it has not been mentioned. It's about refugees and migrants. I'm thinking about that kind of population, group of population that is worse than the poorest of the poor in one country. Many instances, there are refugee camps in their own country, refugees in refugee camp, which mean practically concentration camp. I'm not going to give you all the details that you know about the refugee camp of Palestinian in Palestine, or Syrian in Syria, or Syrians and Palestinian in Lebanon or in Jordan that have been suffering from the international consequences of international occupation or invasion or military intervention. So I believe it has to do both on the international and social contract, but also with the social contract, because talking about migrant and refugees, in my country, we are witnessing every day that in the Mediterranean Sea has become a vast cemetery for thousands and thousands of migrants from not Southern Africa, sorry, for the sub-Saharan Africa mainly. They cross the desert, they die sometimes in the desert, be it Libya, Mauritania, Chad, or Niger, or Algeria. But then the moment they reach the shores of the Mediterranean, we have been seeing every day, we have this terrible morbid account of people who are drawn in the sea. And then when they arrive in Europe, and I do understand the problem and the issue, the economic situation of the country that received them in Europe, such as Greece, which has been very generous in the past, or Italy, Spain, and others, they are again suffering terribly. So I believe that there is something has to be done. It is within the international social contract, because if their own country, they have their own economic and social life firmly established, respected, and if there are more investment in their countries of the South, in the what is so-called third world countries, maybe there will be less people prone to migrate and go and live in refugee camp or just die in the sea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very, very important point. Next is Jimena.
Thank you very much to the Carter Center and to the Carters for this amazing opportunity, and I am humbled to be amongst all of you here the past couple of days. Just wanted to add that inequality and the protection of community leaders cannot be addressed without guaranteeing and strengthening the capacities of Afro-descendant, indigenous, and other minorities, as well as addressing structural racism. We need to uphold and amplify the voices and recommendations of these leaders' communities and have them direct the efforts at all the levels, respecting their cultural autonomy and decision-making processes. Economic rights and abuses related to companies and the international economic system have to take into account the right to free, informed consultation and consent of those whose resources we are taking. Also, militarism should not continue to be a major economic model if we want to stop wars and generate peace around the world. We need to rethink the international trade models as well, so that the engagement doesn't deepen inequality and only benefit parts of companies, usually the persons who run the company and not the workers, but governments and the communities who are the ones that have been the stewards of, who've sustained the natural resources for many centuries. Lastly, protection of human rights. Defenders and communities must focus on prevention of harm at every level, both physical and otherwise. And it must be a partnership with those affected to secure their lives, the lives of their families, and taking into account, in many cases, when it comes to Afro and Indigenous people, a collective approach to protection. Those of us in the United States in the privileged space, and those of us in the West who are not minorities, must serve as conduits, not protagonists in these causes. It's very important that solidarity is based on respect, transparency, and communication.
Thank you very much. Leah? Leah, you're next.
There we go. Good morning to all of you, my sisters and my brothers. And I too want to add my thanks to the Carter Center and its leadership for including me in these conversations. I want to speak from the context in which I live and work as a woman of faith and as an African-American woman. And I am keenly aware in this time, particularly in America, but really all across the world, that much of the conversation of human rights and the denial of human rights is rooted in the context of race. And I believe that, and it is, we've talked about it this whole 3 days, about the disparities that exist in developed and undeveloped nations, the global South, when it comes to people of color, and people not of color. And I think that I would like to see our statement specifically address the issue of race. As President Carter talked about this morning, when he specifically framed issues around race and gender, I think that our statement must also include and acknowledge issues of race, because I am keenly aware that the denial of human rights in my own life is rooted solely in the factor of my race. And so it is very difficult for me and the communities that I come from and the communities that I serve to have a global conversation about human rights when we don't even want to acknowledge my humanity solely because of my race. And for us in this room who do this important work, to leave and not acknowledge it and ignore it and refuse to call it what it is really to be complicit in upholding it and protecting it
And we can't do that. The work is too important. We've invested too much of our time and our energy to go back where we came from with a statement that does not reflect the reality of the people whom we serve.
Thank you, Ignacio and Leah, for those recommendations. I hope Karen and I, maybe we did not, but I hope we emphasize that it was a draft statement, so your initial hearing of it. So we are collecting comments during the discussion. Some people already came up to us after the break. If we're really incredibly efficient, we'll have another revision of it on your tables, maybe after lunch or during one of the breaks. But if not, we still can continue to take your thoughts and comments to the statement up until the end, and we can then revise it after the fact as well. So please do let us know your thoughts, and we will be incorporating them. It was just a draft. So thank you.
Good morning. I think it's still morning or afternoon to you, my co-conspirators for human thriving. Like everyone else, I would like to appreciate the Carter Center for my presence here, particularly to President Carter, who is still my favorite president, and to Mrs. Carter. I was asked yesterday by my president of the institution where I served to think of where I was in 1977 and imagine if I would be here today. And where I was in 1977 was casting my first vote for President Carter. So I find this a very particularly wonderful time to be here. Like Jimena, and like Leah, I also want to lift up the issue around the racialization of of the way oppression shows up in the world. But with that, I also want us to strengthen the statement around the shaping of the moral imagination that belongs to the work not just of religious leaders, but also of teachers. These people that we train, I am a teacher, these people who we train who will go out and lead and set agenda and speak to the larger world have to be fired in their imagination for a better world. I see one of the biggest problems is that people can't even imagine a different world because they're in the process of just surviving. So I want our statement to at least aspire to a higher imagination than just surviving, and that at all intersections. I know we use the word thriving one time in the statement, but I really want us to think about what does it mean? What do we really mean when we say, let's go make a better world?
Thank you very much. Two things I want to say. If you've already spoken, can you put your thing down just so that I don't get all confused? I have a very long list and only about 15 minutes because I want to give our panelists a few minutes to speak. So if you have not put your thing up, I'm closing it unless you give me more time.
No, as I mentioned to you yesterday, I'm going to be more disciplined than even we were the past 3 days, but that's for a very good reason, because President Carter and Mrs. Carter are joining us for lunch. So I'm going to, wherever we are, since you're fairly warned, have a hard stop at 12:55. That's also because I need to give you some instructions on how we're going to go about going to lunch and how some of the rest of the day will go. So I will have a hard stop at 12:55.
Okay, that's 30 seconds. No. It's my 30 seconds. Julia.
Thank you very much. So I would like to thank you all for this wonderful weekend, very beautiful learnings. I come from a country that is a champion in killing human rights defenders, and not only human rights defenders, but also people who are not non-white people. I come from a region that is also in this same situation. My question is, how do we build a social contract that is truly meant at representing people, public interest, and that realization of human rights is taken really in consideration, but considering the too close and dangerous relationship between state and private companies, and this abyssal asymmetry of power between communities, state, and companies. And also what everyone has been saying all these 3 days, 4 days, which is the structure, inequality, racism, sexism, classes that build our societies. I think we're really in a crisis of threat to democracies, with states becoming privatized. We need really to think and act now.
Thank you very much. As I listened to the various expatiations on the concept of the social contract, I mean, 3 powerful women have tried to take us through the concept very for our, Madam Moderator, you are one, Sandra, you are one, and Nasana. I mean, we've thrown so much light. And as I listened to them, then the fundamental question that came to my mind, and I think they are important for our reflection. I mean, do those who are involved in political activism appreciate this whole concept of social contracts? Do all governments, state actors, have full appreciation of the social contract? In my view, it appears to me the answer is no. Do they even appreciate the ethical principles that underpin this? It's not, for me, it's not a scientific issue, it's not a structural issue, but it's an issue of values, the issue of values of those who come to take government. And because of that, I can see power, attainment of power. Power for what? When we struggle to take over power in various countries' governments, power for what? Power for domination, power for exploitation, power for self-enrichment. And you can see the picture clearly that in most governments, these are the reasons why they take power. To dominate those that are weak and to exploit so that they can enrich themselves. That is the issue. So this leads us to the other issue, that what kind of new orientation do we need for political actors to understand why we struggle for power? And I think that is a fundamental issue that we need to address, so that even if those who are in power now are unable to adhere to the demands of social contract, future generation of politicians, how do they understand this? And that is the issue.
Okay, I have 7 people on my list and less than 10 minutes, so each of you need to keep it to 1 minute.
Since I need to keep it to 1 minute, I'm going to say briefly thank you for this great opportunity and for this exchange that has been so enlightening to me. Actually, I want to tap into what Ignacio was saying about the non-restriction of human rights to borders, and I think that should be applied to the private sector as well. I come from a country where many international companies and transnational companies operate, and they do benefit from the exploitation of labor rights and from the violations of environmental laws. Also, I would like to say that Julia and Lulu mentioned a lot that was on my mind already, so I would like to reinforce what they said. And finally, Jimena was talking about prevention, and I do believe that is very important, and it has a lot to do with what Julia was said concerning the discrepancy of power between communities, state, and the private sector. We must not only act when a violation is done, we must do so in order to prevent these horrible actions to take place. We must do preventive work as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for modeling the 1 minute. Catherine?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just wanted to echo Ignacio's request that we add the idea of human rights beyond borders to the statement, that is extraterritorial obligations. I think that's a very important reference to make. And I was wondering if there's time, if the panel could think or make comments on how corruption affects the social contract, both the traditional social contract and the international social contract that Ignacio, again, mentioned previously. In this sense, I wanted to highlight that Global Witness just issued a report noting that countries with higher indices of corruption are also those where there are the most assassinations of human rights defenders working on land rights, so those defending against mining or large-scale farming, for example. So my question is, what can we in civil society do to combat this, because corruption truly distorts the social contract? Thank you.
Thank you. Who is next? Father Jacob.
Je vais parler en français. Juste brièvement, je parle de la libération, la liberté. Là, je reviens sur Amartya Sen, Development as Freedom. Madame professeur Radhika a parlé tout simplement pour demander quel est le rôle de l'économie. Je crois que c'est important. Ma réponse est celle-ci. Comme elle avait déjà dit, l'économie n'est qu'un moyen pour faire le bien, pour que les gens vivent bien. Et la politique, c'est le plus beau des métiers pour faire le bien. Malheureusement, et la politique et l'économie sont devenus des instruments d'oppression, d'esclavage. Comment pouvons-nous libérer ceux qui sont encore aujourd'hui les nouveaux esclaves de l'économie et de la politique? En Afrique, depuis 50 ans, nous avons reçu des indépendances politiques. Mais je crois que nous sommes encore aujourd'hui sous un nouvel esclavage.
Thank you very much. Dennis.
Allô? Oui. Merci beaucoup. Je ne vais pas reprendre ce que le père a dit. Je vais juste soutenir les recommandations que je viens de lire sur cette déclaration. Parce que lorsqu'on discute du contrat social, on veut au fait répondre à la question du rôle de l'État. Et lorsque je vois les recommandations qui sont ici, vu le temps, je les soutiens. Je pense qu'on aura aussi le temps d'en discuter. Merci.
Thank you. And as Laura said, please give more recommendations to her during the rest of the day. So it's not the only opportunity. Sammy?
So I want to thank Carter Center and everyone and make use of having religious leaders here among all of these wonderful human rights defenders to focus on also the social and economic rights for religious minority, especially people that are suffering because only their religious identity, like such as Baha'i, Coptic Christians, Shia, and many of people who are deprived only because of their being born as a Christian or Muslim, that's all. And I think it is a big chance for all religious leaders who are attending here to take the message to their audience about the human rights, to talk about also not only empowering their groups and telling them about the other, but also empowering religious minority and starting being in touch with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bonnie?
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you to the Carter Center. This is my third forum, and I'm the better for it. The potency and vigor of a civilization is contingent upon the strength of its component parts. But when considering a social contract, there's much to be said about the qualities that govern the relationships among the individuals, institutions, and the community. And I want to speak about the importance of building strong, resilient communities that can withstand the pressures that they are facing today, and also remind us of the essential oneness of humanity. For too long, we've been defining ourselves in different identities and othering people, and that has got to stop. We are one community, we are equal in all respects, and men and women, the gender equality is a spiritual reality, and we cannot talk about it in terms of equity. It is not a subjective, advantage that we are giving to the other gender. We are all equal. I also want to just touch upon what Lulu had said, that if we are in fact looking to work for equality, we have to be working within equal systems and change the system itself. Thank you.
Sorry, I just had two more people and we have 2 minutes. Neelam, and then Alfred will be the last.
I want to thank everybody for inviting me here and for sharing their experiences, and also to President Carter. Let me just quickly say, somebody born in 1977 married me, and his name is Jimmy. He was very popular across the world. Just to reinstate the solidarity conversation that was raised, there is value to solidarity which at the collective level translates to critical mass gathering, which leans on, questions, and pushes for wider changes to our systems and models which we discussed that clearly don't work anymore. On an individual level, however, we must remember that it relates to empathy. The value of knowing that there is someone, there's lots of us here, but there are lots of people who are not here because they can't be here for various reasons. The value of knowing that there is someone somewhere who has faced the same challenge that we have and triumphed over it, or failed and regrouped, strategized and kept going. It is solidarity here at the individual level that is very, very important too.
Thank you very much. And Alfred, you've got the last word.
Is this on? We shall overcome. We shall overcome one day. We shall overcome one day. It is very clear this week, as we sat down for the last few days, and we look at the data, and we look at the statistics. These are well thought of data and statistics. Like I said, and everyone has said, we don't need a nuclear scientist to tell us that when the 1% control 50% of the wealth, there's a fundamental flaw in our governance systems. And there's a need to rethink governance and a need for a new social contract. When 4 defendants who are defending the peoples on the planet are slaughtered on a weekly basis, there's a need to rethink governance, a new need for our social contract. When tens of thousands of young people brave the Sahara Desert and cross it and jump on boats, and thousands more drown in the Mediterranean, there's a need to rethink our governance system and a need for a new social contract. When tens of thousands of people
brave, dangerous terrains, gangs, drug lords, people smugglers, walk thousands of miles, join on caravan, and hit different borders. There's a need for rethinking our governance system and a need for a new social contract. When 40+ million people in the richest country on the planet,
Alfred, I'm really sorry, but
there's a need for rethinking this.
I'm scared of Laura. And,
finally,
and I've already taken 1 minute over. So
finally, we are in this boat together, and the need for the people to take charge of the responsibilities is near. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred, and thank you to everyone for the discussion. We will have more opportunities for those that didn't get a chance to speak this afternoon. So for the announcements, please continue wearing your name tags for security, but leave your table tents. We will, during the lunch, those that didn't get an opportunity to sit towards the front, we will be swapping the name tags, so you get that opportunity. Next, for the participants, I don't want anyone else to leave the room yet, but for those participants that have stickers on the back of their name tag that are labeled lunch, I want you, only those people, please let them exit, to go back to the back of the room. There are people there to help you, guide you to your tables at lunch. Please go now and go immediately to the lunch tables. So while everyone else lets them leave, I do want to ask people that have been giving me ideas for the statement and recommendations of what to include, if you could also put that in writing and give it to me in writing. If you have ideas of language that you would like to be used, that would be extremely helpful for me. Once those people have exited, you guys can leave the room, and we are going back to our original room where we had the other days. So that's where lunch will be. We have to walk all the way through the Carter Center, so please walk briskly. And please remember to be seated back here at 2:05. As you saw this morning, President Carter was early. So please be back here at 2:05 and seated and ready to go. And the last reminder is the deadline to submit your questions in the baskets is 3 p.m. today. Thank you and enjoy your lunch.